A haunted house, spook house or ghost house in ghost lore, is a house or other building often perceived as being inhabited by disembodied spirits of the deceased who may have been former residents, or were otherwise connected with the property. Sure, thrillers and horror movies are reliably fun for a good, old-fashioned jump scare, but there's really nothing quite as bone-chilling as real haunted house stories. If you're not convinced, here's plenty of proof in the collection of true stories about real-life haunted houses ahead. From unsuspecting farmhouses in the Midwest, to sprawling Gilded Age, East Coast mansions, to classic storybook cottages in Hollywood, and even bungalows in tropical Honolulu, scoured the country for the most compelling tales of domestic paranormal activity. Here's part 1 of the freakiest real-life haunted house stories ever. Happy haunting. 1. The Amityville Horror House in Amityville, New York. This Dutch colonial sitting pretty on Ocean Avenue in Long Island, New York, is perhaps the country's and world's most famous real haunted house. Haunted or not, the Amityville home has certainly witnessed plenty of horrors. On November 13, 1974, Louise and Ronald DeFeo Sr. and 4 of their children were killed inside the home. Their eldest son, Ronald DeFeo Jr., went unharmed and he was ultimately charged with the murders. A year after the brutal murders, the Lutz family moved into the house, which still housed much of the original furniture and decor from its previous tenants. Then, just 28 days after moving in with their 3 young children, the Lutzes fled the house in a panic. Not long after, they worked with author Jay Anson on the best-selling book-turned-hit movie, The Amityville Horror, which tells the dramatic and controversial tale of the demonic and unseen forces that drove them out. The Lutzes story is widely regarded as a hoax, but plenty of people still vehemently believe it's haunted, and that it was haunted even before the DeFeo family lived and died in it. 2. The Ammons House in Gary, Indiana. In 2011, LaToya Ammons moved into a small single-story home in Gary, Indiana, with her mother and her 3 young children. Only a few short months later, after reportedly experiencing the worst residential demon infestation since the Amityville Horror, Ammons brought her family to the emergency room in an attempt to help free them of demonic possession. After extensive evaluations by police, members of the local church, hospital staff, and the Department of Child Protective Services, the witnesses were torn. Half of them believed the house was infested by spirits and demons, and that the family was genuinely possessed by something paranormal, while the other half blamed psychological issues. Just like the best-selling book about the Amityville house turned into a national sensation, this modern instance of demonic possession went viral. The good news is that the Ammons family was able to find peace when they moved to Indianapolis, but the story, and the house itself, were still getting tons of attention. Unsurprisingly, Ghost Adventure host and self-proclaimed paranormal investigator Zach Bagans bought the property from Ammons' landlord in 2014, to shoot sensationalized, documentary footage inside. Even though Bagans proceeded to tear it down, the Ammons house is about to get even more press. Oscar nominee Lee Daniels is directing a film based on the story, The Deliverance. It's set to stream on Netflix in 2024 and will feature Stranger Things star, Caleb McLaughlin. 3. The Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, California. In 1886, an eccentric widow left her home in Connecticut for California's rural Santa Clara Valley to start a new life after the tragic loss of several family members. She wasn't the average widow, she was Sarah Winchester, the millionaire heiress whose fortune was derived from The Gun That Won the West, an increasingly controversial truth. Once in the Bay Area, during the height of spiritualism, and well before the 19th Amendment, Winchester managed her own finances, and acted on a passion for architecture and design, by overseeing the never-ending construction project of a rambling mansion in San Jose. She named the rambling property Lanata Villa, which she interpreted as house on flat land, but today, it's better known as the Winchester Mystery House. Her reclusive lifestyle, along with the restrictive gender norms of the era and the blood money she was associated with, caused neighbors and the local press to speculate, and legends quickly began to swirl about the mysterious woman and her bewildering house. Though it was a modern marvel at the time, with indoor plumbing, multiple elevators, a hot shower, and central heating, the mansion was appraised as having no value due to doors that opened to nothing but thin air, staircases that lead straight into the ceiling, and its maze of labyrinthine hallways. Legends began swirling, speculating that Winchester's bizarre architectural choices were an attempt to rid the home of unwelcome spirits of the dead, killed by the Winchester rifle, but defenders swear she didn't have a superstitious bone in her body. Regardless, it's possible that Winchester herself still haunts the halls of the house-turned-museum today. 4. The Lemp Mansion in St. Louis, Missouri. Starting strong with a very scary house, the Lemp Mansion in St. Louis, which is known to be one of the most haunted places in America due to its tragic history and links to a wealthy beer baron. Adam Johann Lemp, a German immigrant, was the first person to produce and sell lager-style beer in the U.S. He stored the barrels in an underground cave system beneath the city to keep them cool pre-modern refrigeration. It was successful, but his son, William Lemp, is the one who really brought it to the next level. In the 1860s, William Lemp wanted to live closer to the industrial plant and start a family with his wife Julia, so they built the foreboding home in the historic Benton Park neighborhood right over the cave system. Everything seemed to take a turn for the worse in the new millennium, and William Lemp died by suicide in 1904, after his favorite of 5 sons, Frederick, died tragically due to complications of tuberculosis. A few years later, his wife also died of cancer in the house. In 1920, the youngest daughter, Elsa Lemp, mysteriously died in her home, not the Lemp Mansion then. In 1922, after running the company for years and seeing it flounder during the Prohibition era, William Lemp Jr. shot himself in the same room William Sr. died in. One of William Jr.'s brothers, Charles Lemp, lived in the home from the 1930s until 1949, when he shot his own dog in the basement of the home, before dying by suicide in his room. That same year, the youngest surviving Lemp child, Edwin, sold the house and transformed it into a boarding house, where reports of hauntings began. According to Destination America, witnesses have experienced burning sensations, slamming doors, disembodied moaning and crying, amongst other things. Today, the Lemp Mansion is a restaurant and inn that also holds events, including weddings, murder mystery dinners, and even ghost hunting experiences. 5. The Kasha House of Kaimuki in Honolulu, Hawaii. The Kasha House of Kaimuki in Honolulu, Hawaii has been shrouded in mystery for decades. Its first bad press mention hit the Honolulu Star just months after the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. According to the article, police responded to a call from a woman shouting, "She's trying to kill my children. She's trying to kill my children." When they arrived, they found a young Hawaiian boy, his 3 sisters, and his mother, all shrieking, and being tossed around by nothing. About 30 years later, other occupants of the same home, or one a block away from the original spooky house, reported similar attacks by an unseen force, which the responding officers corroborated. The 2 most common theories surrounding the source of these reported attacks are a demonic shape-shifting creature of Japanese folkloric origins, known as the Kasha, and the angry spirit of a corpse buried in the backyard. Though it has since been torn down and replaced by condos, the dark energy still lingers, according to locals and residents. 6. 1000 Lombard Street in San Francisco, California. Socialite, journalist, and famed party host Patricia Montandon moved into an apartment on San Francisco's famous, crooked block, Lombard Street, in 1960. She lived happily in her Russian Hill abode for 8 years, until things began to go awry, following an astrology-themed party she hosted in the apartment. In her memoir The Intruders, Montandon attributes a series of hauntings that culminated in a corporal tragedy to the bizarre behavior of a disgruntled tarot card reader, who may have cursed the apartment the night of that fateful party. From eerier laughter and faint music seemingly coming from within the apartment on repeat, to constant rushes of cold winds despite locked doors and windows, and strange disembodied footsteps, the paranormal events were stacking up quickly. But Montandon was also the victim of physical crimes following the party, including a robbery, harassment, possibly arson, and more. After a tragic fire at the apartment and the premature passing of 3 of her close friends, all of whom had separately lived in the apartment between 1968 and 1969, Montandon set off on her own investigation to uncover the root of the apparent curse on 1000 Lombard Street. 7. The Ackley House in Nyack, New York. Nicknamed Ackley House, after its one-time occupants, the Ackley family, this classic Queen Anne sits on the Hudson River across from Sleepy Hollow, New York. The many ghosts who roamed the halls of One Lavetta Place were nothing but friendly, though they were active enough to inspire the matriarch, Helen Ackley, to write a national article about them in Reader's Digest. The article gained enough momentum that the house became a stop on local ghost tours, which ended up having some not-so-great ramifications when it came time to sell the home in the late 1980s. The Ackleys found themselves entangled in a legal battle over whether or not they should have disclosed the haunted nature of the house to the Stambos-Vicky family. In a landmark legal decision now referred to as the Ghostbusters ruling, Ackley House was deemed haunted by the New York Supreme Court, and the buyers were able to pull out of the sale while also getting half of their down payment back. One Lavetta Place has since been home to several celebrities, including musician Ingrid Michaelson. 8. The Chop Chop House in Boise, Idaho. The house at 805 West Linden Street in Boise, Idaho, is hard to miss. Covered in a layer of soot, with windows broken and boarded up and trash strewn about the yard, the 2-story, 2,728 square foot craftsman-style home looks like an abandoned horror movie set. The true story, however, is much scarier. Locals refer to it as the Boise Murder House, or even more eyebrow-raising, the Chop Chop House, which is a glib reference to the gruesome homicide that took place there more than 3 decades ago. According to many who've lived in the neighborhood or even rented out a room in the house itself, the basement, in particular, exudes some haunted energy. There have been reports of shadowy figures appearing and disappearing out of nowhere, strange liquid oozing down the walls, and more. 9. The Grey Gardens in East Hampton, New York. The Grand East Hampton estate known as Grey Gardens has a fascinating history with many ups and downs. The 4 acres of land the home now sits on is in the Georgica Beach section of East Hampton, one of the most expensive regions in the world, and it was purchased by a wealthy couple in 1895, before the home was built in the early 1900s. By 1913, it was sold to the president of a coal company whose wife, Anna Gilman Hill, imported ornate concrete walls from Spain to enclose the garden. The house was called Grey Gardens because of the color of the dunes, the cement garden walls, and the sea mist. Later, in 1923, the home was sold to Edith Bouvier Beale, the parental aunt of Jackie Onassis Kennedy and Lee Radziwill, and her family. After a series of misfortunes and financial losses, the home fell into disrepair and was overrun by cats and raccoons, and perhaps something else not of this realm. Partially because Big Edie Beale and her daughter, Little Edie Beale, couldn't afford to maintain the mansion on their own. The women's story and star power was made famous in a 1975 documentary by Albert and David Maysles. Big Edie held onto the property until her death in 1977, and her spirit is said to remain at Grey Gardens, watching over the house. Among the believers is author and journalist Sally Quinn, best known for her column in The Washington Post, who purchased the home from Little Edie in 1979, and she swears that it's haunted. 10. The Mercer Williams House in Savannah, Georgia. Located across from one of Savannah, Georgia's most famous and pristine squares, Monterey Square in the city's historic district, the Mercer Williams House dates back to 1860. In the 1970s, famed preservationist and antiques dealer Jim Williams restored the home to its former glory after years of neglect. This Italianate revival played host to 3 untimely deaths, including that of 11-year-old Tommy Downs, when he fell off the roof in 1969, the 1981 fatal shooting of Danny Hansford by Williams, and Williams himself, when he died in the same room as Hansford less than a year after being acquitted of Hansford's death in a 4th trial. If the story sounds familiar, it's probably because you recognize it from the best-selling book, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. Much like the rest of the city, the home was supposedly built right on top of unmarked graves. Rumors about the crime and ensuing ghost stories continue to swirl to this day. 11. The Villisca Axe Murder House in Villisca, Iowa. On June 10, 1912, Josiah and Sarah Moore were bludgeoned to death inside of their home in Villisca, Iowa. Their 4 children, and 2 friends who were spending the night, were also killed, and to this day, the crime remains unsolved. Their home is considered one of the most haunted houses in the country, and guests are drawn to it. People even pay $400 plus to stay for one night. Tours have been cut short by children's voices, falling lamps, moving ladders, and flying objects, says the Villisca Axe Murder House website. And, in 2014, a paranormal investigator stabbed himself after spending the night. Skeptics have left believers, adds the website. 12. The Jean Harlow House in Los Angeles, California. Los Angeles is one of the best destinations for haunted house hunting, and this Bavarian-style home in Beverly Hills has a particularly gruesome history. In 1932, it was home to the iconic actress Jean Harlow and her abusive husband, Paul Byrne, who shot himself in the head while standing in front of the mirror. Their butler discovered him and called MGM instead of the police, so there were tons of rumors that it wasn't actually suicide. Many suspected Byrne's ex-girlfriend, a suspicion exacerbated by her jumping off a boat to her death a couple of days later. Jean moved out after his death but died only a few years later at the age of 26. But wait, it gets creepier. In 1963, celebrity hairstylist Jay Sebring bought the home and lived there with his girlfriend, Sharon Tate, until she left him for Roman Polanski. They were still friends and remained so until both of them were murdered by the Charles Manson cult. Tate was the same age as Harlow when she passed. But back to when the couple lived in the Harlow house. Tate told several friends of creepy occurrences in the home and even mentioned it in interviews. For example, once, when she was sleeping in the master bedroom alone, she saw a creepy little man. Her friends say she believed it to be Paul Byrne's ghost. She was so freaked out when she saw the alleged ghost that she ran out of the room and then saw a hanging shadowy corpse with its throat slit in the hallway. There are also stories about 2 other people dying in the swimming pool over the years. 13. The S.K. Pierce Mansion in Gardner, Massachusetts. Massachusetts has no shortage of haunted mansions, it seems, and the S.K. Pierce Victorian is one of the state's eeriest. The original occupant, Sylvester Pierce, had just started making his fortune in the furniture business when he built this home for himself, his son, and his wife, Susan. As a man about town, he hosted many notable people in his 7,000-square-foot home throughout the years, including President Calvin Coolidge, Betty Davis, and Norman Rockwell. Only a week after moving into the home, Susan fell ill and passed away from a mysterious bacterial disease. A year later, he remarried Ellen, a woman 30 years his junior, and had 2 more children. Years later, when both Sylvester and Ellen had passed away, his sons embarked on a fiery feud about the property as well as the furniture company, but the Great Depression swept in and made their choice easier since the company basically went bankrupt. The youngest son, Edward, was given control of the home when he turned it into a boarding house. It became a hotspot for illicit activities including the murders and sudden, tragic deaths of several occupants according to local lore. As a result of these violent ends, guests have reported every kind of haunting imaginable, from visions of apparitions to flying objects, disembodied sounds, pressure, temperature drops, and more. We will be continuing this next time for the part 2 of this chilling list of real-life haunted house stories. That concludes our today's episode in Story Time. Stay tuned for another tale of extraordinary and chilling mystery unfold. Till next time, thank you for watching. Leave a comment and suggestion below. Please don't forget to subscribe and click the subscribe button.